سر کنم من گلوی زین حدیث عاقبت سستر کنم خنده مستانه ای زین تلخی ناب شراب اشک دل فریاد مستانه به نامش برکنم یاد بادا یاد بادا یاد بادا ساقیا آن روی همچو هورا آن نگاه اغلده در احمق مشهور را خنده بی مثل او بر دل دکانی هم زده پرم کرده در دل و مغز و روانم تو را
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know, my name is Joanna Godwin-Seidl, and I am your host this evening for this evening's reading of 1001 Nights. Good evening, Maren. Good evening, Tim. Hi, both of you. It's lovely to see you here. For those of you who join us later, welcome. Without further ado, I will begin. I just want to let you know, if you do want to support us, we have been reading since March 20th, 2020, when the first lockdown started, and we are still reading, and we are still going to continue to read, and we will have a special reading on the 21st or the 22nd of May with live music by Kamyab Sadiri, who you can hear right now. If you want to support us, then it's www.paypal.me/viennatheatreproject.com. I am going to turn Kamyab off because I can't, what do you call it? I can't do two things at once. I can't listen to this music and read. So I'm going to turn him down for the moment, and then maybe at the end we'll listen to him one more time. I hope you're all sitting very comfortably. Without further ado, let us begin. Now we are on when it was the 411th night. Scheherazade said, "It has reached me, O auspicious king, that the young man and the maid met between the two parties and embraced, and both fell dead upon the ground. Whereat came there out an old man from one of the tents and stood over them, exclaiming, 'Verily, we are Allah's, and unto him we are returning.' Then weeping sore, he said, 'Allah have ruth on you both. By the Almighty, though you are not united in your lives, I will at least unite you after your deaths.' and he bade lay them out. So they washed them and shrouded them in one shroud and dug for them one grave and prayed one prayer over them both and buried them in one tomb. Nor was there man or woman in the two parties, but I saw weeping over them and buffeting their faces. Then I questioned the sheikh of them, and he said, "She was my daughter, and he was my brother's son, and love brought them to pass, thou seest." I exclaimed, "Allah amend thee, but why didst thou not marry them to each other?" Quoth he, "I feared shame and dishonour, and now I am fallen unto both." And they tell the tale of the mad lover. That's better. There we go. Of the mad lover. Quoth Abu al-Abbas al-Mubarad, "I set out one day with a company to Al-Barid on an occasion, and coming to the monastery of Hirakl, we alighted in its shade. Presently, a man came out to us and said, 'There are madmen in the monastery, and amongst them one who speaketh wisdom. If ye saw him, ye would marvel at his speech.' So we arose all and went into the monastery, where we saw a man seated on a skin mat in one of the cells, with bare head and eyes intently fixed upon the wall. We saluted him, and he returned our salam without looking at us. And one said to us, 'Repeat some verses to him, for when he heareth verse, he speaketh.' So I repeated these two couplets. O best of race, to whom gave Hawa boon of birth, except for thee the world were neither sweet nor fair. Thou art he whose face, by Allah shown to man, doth ward off death, decay, and hoary hair." When he heard from me this praise of the apostle, he turned towards us and repeated these lines. "Well, Allah wotteth I am sorely plagued, nor can I show my pain to human sight. 2 souls have I, one soul is here contained, while another woneth in another sight. Meseems the absent soul's like present soul, and that she suffers what to me is dight." Then he asked us, "Have I said well or said ill?" And we answered, "Thou hast said the clean contrary of ill, well and right well." Then he put out his hand to a stone that was by him and took it up. Whereupon, thinking he would throw it at us, we fled from him. But he fell to beating upon his breast there with violent blows and said to us, "Fear not, but draw near and hear somewhat from me and receive it from me." So we came back, and he repeated these couplets. When they made their camels yellow-white kneel down at dawning grey, they mounted her on crupper, and the camel went his way. Mine eyeballs through the prison wall beheld them, and I cried, with streaming eyelids, and a heart that burnt in dire dismay. O camel driver, turn thy beast that I farewell my love. In parting and farewelling her, I see my doomed day. I am faithful to my vows of love which I have never broke. Would heaven I kenned what they have done with vows that vowed they. Then he looked at me and said, Say me, dost thou know what they did? Answered I, Yes. Well, they are dead. Almighty Allah have mercy on them. At this his face changed, and he sprang to his feet and cried out, How knowest thou that they be dead? And I replied, Were they alive, they had not left thee thus. Quoth he, By Allah, thou art right, and I care not to live after them. Then his side muscles quivered, and he fell on his face. And we ran up to him and shook him and found him dead. The mercy of the Almighty be on him. At this we marvelled and mourned for him, and sore mourning laid him out and buried him. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 412th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Al-Mubarrad thus continued, When the man fell, we mourned over him and sore mourning, and laid him down and out and buried him. And when I returned to Baghdad and went into the Caliph at Mutawakkil, he saw the trace of tears on my face and said to me, What is this? So I told him what had passed, and it was grievous to him, and he cried, What moved thee to deal with him thus? By Allah, if I thought thou didst not repent it and regret him, I would punish thee therefore. And he mourned for him the rest of the day. And amongst the tales they tell is one of the prior who became a Muslim. Quoth Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn al-Ambari, I once left Anbar on a journey to Amuria, where there came out to me the prior of the monastery and superior of the monkery, Abd al-Masih hight, and brought me into the building. There I found 40 religious, who entertained me that night with fair guest right. And I left them, after seeing among them such diligence in adoration and devotion as I never beheld the like of in any others. Next day I farewelled them, and fared forth, and after doing my business at Amuria, I returned to my home at Anbar. Next year I made a pilgrimage to Mecca. And as I was circumambulating the holy house, I saw Abd al-Masih, the monk also compassing the Kaaba, and with him 5 of his fellows, the shavelings. Now, when I was sure that it was indeed he, I accosted him, saying, Art thou not Abd al-Masih the religious? And he replied, Nay, I am Abdallah, the desirous. Therewith I fell to kissing his grey hairs and shedding tears. Then, taking him by the hand, I led him aside into a corner of the temple and said to him, "Tell me the cause of thy conversion to Al-Islam." And he made reply, "Verily, 'twas a wonder of wonders that befell us. A company of Moslem devotees came to the village wherein is our convent, and sent a youth to buy them food. He saw in the market a Christian damsel selling bread, who was of the fairest of women, and he was struck at first sight with such love of her that his senses failed him, and he fell on his face in a fainting fit. When he revived, he returned to his companions and told them what had befallen him, saying, "Go ye about your business. I may not go with you." They chided him and extorted him, but he paid no heed to them. So they left him whilst he entered the village and seated himself at the door of the woman's booth. She asked what he wanted, and he told her that he was in love with her, whereupon she turned from him. But he abode in his place 3 days without tasting food, keeping his eyes fixed on her face. Now, whenas she saw that he departed not from her, she went to her people and acquainted them with his case. And they set on him the village boys, who stoned him and bruised his ribs and broke his head. But for all this, he would not budge. Then the villagers took counsel together to slay him. But a man of them found him lying prostrate on the ground. But a man of them came to me and told me of his case, and I went out to him and found him lying prostrate on the ground. So I wiped the blood from his face and carried him to the convent and dressed his wounds, and there he abode with me for 14 days. But as soon as he could walk, he left the monastery. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 413th night, Scheherazade said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Abdallah the religious continued. So I carried him to the convent and dressed his wounds, and he abode with me for 14 days. But as soon as he could walk, he left the monastery and returned to the door of the woman's booth, where he sat grazing on her as before. When she saw him, she came out to him and said, 'By Allah, thou movest me to pity. Wilt thou enter my faith that I may marry thee?' He cried, 'Allah forbid that I should put off the faith of unity and enter that house of plurality. Quoth she, 'Come in with me to my house and take thy will of me and wend thy ways in peace.' Quoth he, 'Not so. I will not waste the worship of 12 years for the lust of an eye twinkle.' Said she, 'Well, then depart from me forthwith.' And he said, "My heart will not suffer me to do that." Whereupon she turned her countenance from him. Presently the boys found him out and began to pelt him with stones, and he fell on his face, saying, "Verily, Allah is my protector, who sent down the book of the Quran, and he protecteth the righteous." At this, I sallied forth, and driving away the boys, lifted his head from the ground, and heard him say, "Allah mine, unite me with her in paradise." Then I carried him to the monastery, but he died before I could reach it. And I bore him without the village, and I dug for him a grave and buried him. And next night, when half of it was spent, the damsel cried with a great cry, and she in her bed. The villagers flocked to her and questioned her of her case. Quoth she, "As I slept, behold, the Moslem man came into me, and taking me by the hand, carried me to the gate of paradise. But the guardian denied me entrance, saying, "'Tis forbidden to unbelievers." So I embraced Al-Islam at his hands, and entering with him, beheld therein pavilions and trees, such as I cannot describe to you. Moreover, he brought me to a pavilion of jewels, and said to me, "Of a truth, this is my pavilion, and thine, nor will I enter it save with thee. But after 5 nights thou shalt be with me therein, if it be the will of Allah Almighty." Then he put forth his hand to a tree which grew at the door of the pavilion, and plucked therefrom 2 apples, and gave them to me, saying, "Eat this, and keep the other, that the monks may see it." So I ate one of them, and never tasted I aught sweeter. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 414th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the woman continued. So he plucked 2 apples and gave them to me, saying, 'Eat this, and keep the other, that the monks may see it.' So I ate one of them, and never tasted aught sweeter. Then he took my hand and fared forth, and carried me back to my house. And when I awoke, I found the taste of the apple in my mouth, and the other in my hand." So saying, she brought out the apple, and in the darkness of the night it shone as it were sparkling star. So they carried her and the apple with her to the monastery, where she repeated her vision and showed it to us. Never saw we like among all the fruits of the world. Then I took a knife and cut the apple into pieces, according as we were folk in company, and never knew we aught more delicious than its savour, nor more delightsome than its scent. But we said, haply, this was a devil that appeared unto her to seduce her from her faith. Thereupon her people took her and went away. But she abstained from eating and drinking. And on the 5th night she rose from her bed, and going from the village to the grave of her Moslem lover, threw herself upon it and died. Her family not knowing what had come of her. But on the morrow there came to the village 2 Moslem elders, clad in haircloth, and with them 2 women in light garb, and said, O people of the village, with you is a woman, Saint Awaliya, of the friends of Allah, who died at Moslena, and we will take charge of her in lieu of you. So the villagers sought her and found her dead on the Muslim's grave. And they said, this was one of us, and she died in our faith, so we will take charge of her. Rejoined the 2 old men, nay, she died a Muslimah, and we claim her. And this dispute waxed to a quarrel between them, till one of the sheikhs said, be this the test of her faith? The 40 monks of the monastery shall come and try to lift her from the grave. If they succeed, then she died a Nazarene. If not, one of us shall come and lift her up, and if she be lifted by him, she died a Muslimah. The villagers agreed to this and fetched the 40 monks, who heartened one another and came to her to lift her, but could not. Then we tied a great rope around her middle and haled at it. But the rope broke asunder, and she stirred not. And the villagers came and did the like, but could not move her from her place. At last, when all means failed, we said to one of the 2 sheikhs, come to her and lift her. So he went up to the grave and, covering her with his mantle, said, in the name of Allah, the compassionating, the compassionate, and of the faith of the Apostle of Allah, on whom be prayers and peace. Then he lifted her, and, taking her in his bosom, betook himself with her to a cave hard by, where they laid her, and the 2 women came and washed her and shrouded her. Then the 2 elders bore her to a Muslim's lover's grave and prayed over her and buried her by his side and went their ways. Now, we were eyewitnesses of all this, and when we were alone with one another, we said, in sooth, the truth is most worthy to be followed. And indeed, the verity has been made manifest to us, nor is there a proof more patent of the truth of Al-Islam than that we have seen this day with our eyes. So I and all the monks became Muslims, and on likewise did the villagers, and we sent to the people of Mesopotamia for a doctor of the law to instruct us in the ordinances of Al-Islam and the canons of the faith. They sent us a learned man and a pious, who taught us the rites of prayer and the tenets of the faith. And we are now in ease abounding, so to Allah be praise and the thanks. And they also tell a tale of the loves of Abu Isa and Kurrat Al-Ayn. Quoth Amru bin Masada, Abu Isa, son of Al-Rashid and brother to Al-Mamun, was enamored of one Kurrat Al-Ayn, a slave girl belonging to Ali bin Hisham, and she also loved him. But he concealed his passion, complaining of it to none, neither discovering his secret to anyone of his pride and magnanimity. For he had used his utmost endeavour to purchase her of her master, but he had failed. At last, when his patience was at an end, and his passion was sore on him, and he was helpless in the matter, he went to Al-Mamun one day of state after the folk had retired, and said to him, O Commander of the Faithful, if thou wilt this day make trial of thine Al-Qadies by taking them unawares, thou wilt know the generous from the mean, and note each one's place after the quality of his mind. But in saying this, he purposed only to sit with Kurrat Al-Ayn in her lord's house. Quoth Al-Mamun, right is thy recking, and bade make ready a barge called the Flyer, wherein he embarked with Abu Isa and a party of his chief officers. The first mansion he visited unexpectedly was that of Hamid al-Tawil of Tus, whom he found seated. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Hi, Sammy. Thank you very, very much for listening in, everybody, for all of those of you who listen later. I hope you all have a beautiful day, a beautiful evening. If you're about to go to bed, then I wish you all a very, very good night. Many blessings from me. It was lovely reading for you as usual. Don't forget, I won't be back until next Tuesday. There is no reading tomorrow, as Saman is off at the moment doing something else. It's just me reading twice a week until she's back. We can't wait for that moment to happen, I know. I can't either. So in the meantime, I still look forward very much to reading for you. Thank you very much for listening in tonight. And let's find out what's going to happen next week with these two, I'm sure, soon to be lovers. But I don't know because I haven't read that far yet. Good night, everybody. Take care. Blessings. Bye-bye.